Episode 1 vanished in the shadows. The city drowned in a gray morning fog that clung to rooftops and dissolved the outlines of streets. Houses, pressed tightly together, seemed alive, their windows glinting like eyes watching every step. James sat in his office, a cramped room with a battered desk buried under papers, and a single lamp whose light flickered, as if afraid of the dark. The smell of coffee mingled with the dampness of old walls hung in the air. He was a detective like countless others, weary, sharp-witted, but stripped of illusions about justice. His cases usually boiled down to lost wallets or cheating husbands, but today, something shifted. On the desk lay a folder with a new case, Helen Marlowe, 32, missing for 3 days. Her husband, pale and jittery, claimed she left the house one evening and never returned. The police shrugged. A typical story, they said. Probably ran off with a lover or got lost in a drunken haze. But one glance at Helen's photograph told James otherwise. Her eyes, dark and fathomless, stared from the picture as if they knew something he didn't. His honed instinct whispered this woman didn't just vanish, she was taken. The first clue. James started at Helen's apartment. The building stood on the city's outskirts, in a district where streets reeked of dampness and neglect. It was old, its paint peeling, the staircase creaking like a moan. Inside, the apartment felt frozen in time. Dusty books lined the shelves. A cup of unfinished tea sat on the table. A coat hung by the door as if waiting for its owner. But something was off. The air was heavy, laced with the scent of ash, though there was no fireplace. James noticed a faint gray line on the floor ash, barely visible, trailing to the window. He ran a finger along the sill, and his skin reddened, as if burned. On the table lay her diary, open to the last page. The handwriting was hurried, almost frantic there watching. The circle doesn't lie. Below was a symbol, a circle crossed by a diagonal line. James froze. He'd seen this mark before. In old city archives, in notes about a forgotten tragedy from the 1920s, when several people vanished without a trace. They spoke of a fire in an abandoned mansion, but no bodies were ever found. He brushed the thought aside, but Helen's diary seemed to whisper this is no coincidence. A trail to the past. Helen's traces led to unexpected places. Her purse was found in an alley by the river, where the water smelled of rust, and the stones bore strange patterns resembling that same crossed circle. Inside the purse was a ticket to an old theater, long shuttered, but James knew shadows still gathered there, those seeking not art, but something else. He went to the theater, and its facade greeted him with grim silence. The windows were boarded up, but one pane was cracked, and a shadow flickered through the gap, too swift to be a bird. The door yielded with a long groan, and inside, the air wrapped him in the scent of moldy wood and decay. In the foyer, beneath a layer of dust, he found her scarf, soaked with that same acrid ash smell. On the floor, barely noticeable, a line of ash stretched toward the stage. James stepped into the auditorium, his flashlight cutting through the darkness to reveal rows of chairs standing like ghostly spectators. The stage was empty, but the curtain trembled, though no breeze stirred. He pulled it aside, revealing a niche where an old book lay, its leather cover scorched with the crossed circle symbol. The pages smelled of fire, and the text, written in an unknown tongue, seemed to writhe under his gaze. James felt the air thicken, and the shadow behind him grew denser than it should have been. City legends. He returned to the city and dug deeper. In the library, among dusty archives, he found an article about the 1920s fire. A mansion on the hill had burned to the ground, but locals whispered that the blaze was no accident. They spoke of rituals, of cloaked figures meeting there at night. The victims, all young women like Helen, vanished before the fire, their belongings turning up in odd places by the river. In the theater, even at an old auction where paintings later disappeared. James recalled the symbol from the diary, and realized he'd seen it not just in the archives but on the frames of those missing paintings. His next stop was an old antiquarian who knew the city's dark underbelly. The man, his eyes gleaming like embers, spoke of the keepers of the Flamea secret society that for centuries collected books, paintings and people to complete a ritual unlocking truth and fire. Helen, he said, had been drawn to these legends, digging too deep. She visited the library, went to the theater, even tried to buy a painting at the auction, one depicting a burning city. The old man fell silent, but his look said more. Helen hadn't vanished, she'd been taken. Shadows deepen. James returned to the river where the purse was found. At night, the fog was so thick his flashlight barely pierced it. He caught movement by the water, a cloaked figure whose outline shimmered like a mirage. It vanished as he stepped closer, but a mark remained on a stone, a crossed circle, seared as if by flame. His heart raced. He felt Helen was near. Yet not in this world. Her traces led beyond, where shadows grew more real than light. He found her coat in an abandoned house by the river, an old mansion that echoed the one burned a century ago. Inside, the air was thick with ash, the walls etched with symbols. On the floor lay a photograph of Helen, her face burned away, and beside it, a note. Fire knows. James understood her disappearance wasn't just a crime, but part of a ritual begun long before he was born. The library, the hilltop mansion, the auction, the theater all lay ahead. But already here, in this case, he'd crossed paths with the keepers. They watched him, knowing he wouldn't stop. On the edge, James stood in the dark mansion, clutching the note. The fog outside writhed like a living thing, and a whisper, faint but insistent, came from the walls. Truth and fire. He knew Helen might be beyond saving, but her traces were a key to a truth that would change everything. His investigation had just begun, each step pulling him deeper into a labyrinth where books vanished, paintings dissolved, and stages turned into altars. He sensed the keepers had chosen him not as a victim, but as a player in their game. He stepped outside, and the fog parted, revealing the city. But now James saw it differently. Behind every corner, in every window, in every shadow, he felt their presence. His case about a missing woman had become something more, a beginning of a path, where truth was more dangerous than lies. He gripped the note and moved forward, knowing the library, the hilltop mansion, the auction, and the theater awaited him.